My first ever semi-serious YouTube video was talking about why I decided to change from using Nikon cameras to Canon. A change that I still don't regret, but it was an absolutely terrible video looking back at it. I hope that today I can put my thoughts through a little bit more clearly while we talk about why my time with Canon is coming to a close and I'm jumping into the world of Sony mirrorless cameras. Specifically, I know it's a topic that's been beaten to death, but I want to talk about some of the less discussed points of the new Canon R5 and R6 compared to the Sony A7S III. So, let's get into it. Hey, what's up? I'm Scott, and today we'll skip the whole subscribe, like, etc. deal. But still, feel free. Today we're talking about why I'm moving from Canon to Sony, and more specifically from the R or R5 to the A7S III and a few other bodies like the A7R IV here and the A7 III. If you want to check out any of this gear, of course, there's going to be links for everything that we talk about down in the video descriptions. Before all of that though, just a very quick backstory of who I am and what I do that I think will help through this video, and feel free to skip ahead to any of the different timestamps right here. I'll wait to give you a second to check that out. Okay, here we go. I do both paid photography and videography work, sometimes small wedding parties, mostly portraits though, and I also do promotional videos and sometimes commercials for local companies. Of course, there's also YouTube, which, yes, it's a job despite how cool it is to be able to do what we do. So where I live is in the fairly secluded countryside of Japan, and it's an odd market. They're kind of stuck in the old ways, and of course things like camera assistance, focus pullers, grip, all of that pretty much do not exist. On top of that, budgets usually barely cover my own work, never mind being able to pay somebody to help me carry stuff or set up stuff. So while I have been filming with the Zcam E2 F6 for a while now, I really wanted to scale down to something smaller, faster, and easier for what's usually essentially a one-man band. If a client has bigger budget and higher needs, I can always rent something. So just in time, in comes Canon with a camera that looked so promising to do 90% of what I needed. The raw video promised high quality and dynamic range, so I was hoping that that would come into those 4K modes in the R5 as well through firmware, not only 8K. But overall, I mean, we had high frame rates with 10-bit codecs, you got killer autofocus and IBIS for handheld work, which is 90% of what I do, and the familiarity of the R system body design. Then Canon's cripple hammer in action with the overheating. But that's not even the real reason that I decided to switch. This overheating issue really feels like something that they can possibly fix or at least improve with firmware. But honestly, even if the overheating issue didn't exist, I'd still be happier with the A7S III and even the A7R IV to a certain degree, and here's why. 1. No record limit. I mean, even the A7R IV and even the Sony ZV-1, which I picked up as a behind-the-scenes camera, has no record limit. I shoot interviews fairly often, and they do go over 30 minutes from time to time. Even shooting YouTube videos, I can easily go over 30 minutes. And when I'm shooting with 2 or 3 cameras, I don't want to keep track of time limits on all of those. 2. The full-sized HDMI. I hated the HDMI on the EOS R, and the R5 is even worse. I actually don't even want to use an external monitor most of the time if I don't have to, as part of being super running gun, small camera bag and all that anyway. But when I do need that HDMI port for a monitor, a recorder, or a wireless transmitter, I would much rather be working with a full-sized HDMI. Plus, we'll get 16-bit RAW out of the HDMI on the Sony. Crazy. RAW will honestly probably not be a huge part of my workflow anyway, thanks to the high dynamic range 10-bit internal video on the A7S III, but I am glad that they made it external so we can take full advantage of it when we do without any in-body limitations like overheating or smaller card sizes. The A7S III and A7R IV both have hot shoes that can take awesome audio accessories like a compact wire-free shotgun mic and the XLR mic adapter, which will be amazing to have on interview shoots. Again, it's less gear, less people necessary to set up and run everything, less hassle in post. Honestly, it would even be useful for live streaming with something like the Atom Mini, where it's easier to take audio from the HDMI source instead of that little 3.5 input jack. I could have my usual boom mic here running right into the camera with that XLR adapter, and boom, solid and simple. Now keep in mind here throughout this my background, and remember that I'm not planning to shoot big Hollywood movies or huge big network TV commercials. Anyway, jumping into reason number 4, the A7S III will work in 99% of the recording modes with regular SD card, which I already have a bunch of. I have a handful of Angelbird UHS-2 cards, and I'll probably be getting a couple of more, but it's great to not have to dump a ton more money into CF Express cards like I would with the R5. Even then, that only gets one card slot that can take full advantage of a good number of their built-in modes. The A7S III, on the other hand, can write to both cards at the same time for backup if you want, with any of their recording modes. And as far as I know, you should be able to do that even when recording external RAW. I will absolutely not need that for most of the time, but when shooting something that's maybe more critical, like at a wedding for example, it's awesome to have backup options in every single recording mode. Custom white balance settings may seem like an easy thing to overlook, but if you've ever filmed on a non-cinema style Canon camera, you'll know that setting custom white balance with a gray card is super annoying. First, switch back into photo mode, take a photo where the gray card really should be filling the frame, which means if you're on a tripod back further away from your set, take that off, move into your lighting, take that picture, then set up on the tripod again, go back into movie mode, jump into the menu, choose that photo to set as your custom white balance, which I think you only get one custom white balance. I could be wrong about that. But anyway, switch into that mode. With the Sony, even the A7R IV, just go into your custom white balance setting, choose set, and then you can move that tiny little target anywhere in your frame where the gray card is, which is much easier than having to physically move close in order to fill the frame. Then just click it, and then you're good to go. Plus, you have multiple custom white balance settings, which for me is absolutely critical. I have one set here in the studio that I don't want to have to retake each and every time since my lighting doesn't change. And then I want to be able to set custom white balances in the same way when I'm on location shooting for a client as well. Now I can go back and forth between those without messing up my in-studio setting. This may sound like a nitpicky detail, but it's something I do multiple times nearly every shoot, and it's a critical part of the workflow, so making it easier and faster on the Sony is actually a very big deal. So speaking of that, the Sony system has even more features like peaking and zebras built in. And not only zebras, but two types of zebras, either for highlights or for targeting a specific exposure range like skin tones, which is very customizable and extremely useful. Honestly, it's almost as good as having false color sometimes. Weirdly, you can't get RGB histograms while shooting like you can with Canon, and of course there's no waveforms here still, but the assist features we do have on the Sony side are very, very useful. Now add to all of that, the A7S III just doesn't overheat. I mean, maybe if you push it to insane limits, you can make it overheat, but the vast majority of people who have had hands-on experience with it, which I hope to be soon one of that group, have said that it just does not overheat even in the highest codecs in hot weather, anything like that. Again, not only that the Canon overheats here, but that it takes so long to get back to being usable is a huge problem. Shoot some photos and then switch to video even, forget about it. So speaking of photos, like I said, I do shoot photos quite often too, and the A7R IV is a brilliant photo camera. Of course, the R5 is too, but the A7R IV is a brilliant photo cam that also has no recording limit. It doesn't overheat as far as I've seen, and it has the new audio-friendly hot shoe plus easy custom white balance settings. It will be an amazing B camera for the A7S III and an incredible camera to have in my kit overall. It will also offer an alternative to the 12 megapixels in the A7S III when that's just not enough, which honestly probably it will always be enough for me. I don't shoot for clients who print much, so for web use, even for digital signage in stores where a lot of my work does go to, 12 megapixels will probably cut it in most cases, unless I need to crop. So, am I 100% in love with this change? No, of course not. I already said that I don't regret switching to Canon, and that's because I've just loved using their cameras. I mean, I used the EOS R for a lot, even though it was pretty severely limited for video use. So to balance this video out, let's talk quickly about what I will miss from the Canon system. 1. The feel, or ergonomics, whatever you call it. I've actually really been enjoying the A7R IV, and it's insanely customizable, which is great, but it's overwhelming. But every single Canon camera that I've used just feels like a glove in your hand. It just fits. They feel amazing, and they're simple in that sort of Apple computer sort of way where they're really easy to use and understand, but of course they're inherently a little bit crippled compared to, for example, the Sony, which lets you do just about anything with their crazy complex menu system. Which is better? I don't know. I honestly think it's just a matter of getting used to it one way or the other. 2. The drop-in filter adapter, which was amazing for the most part. Being able to put ND or polarizer filters even on bulbous lenses with no front filter threads, or switch out lenses without having to unscrew and screw on the front filter every time. Very, very useful. But the tiny little wheel for adjustments was just terrible. I hated it. It was too small, too light, and then it would go all blue if you went too far. A dedicated Vari ND like the Polar Pro or even K&F, which are surprisingly good for the price, will probably get better results overall. They'll have their limitations as well, but again, I guess it's just a matter of getting used to it one way or the other. Photo and video settings were all separate on the EOS R, and I loved that. It's not that way on the A7R IV, but from what I heard, it is that way on the A7S III, which is great and possibly even better implemented than Canon because you can customize exactly what settings carry over and what don't. But for now, I will miss that on the EOS R. As a final closer, just a couple of things that need to be mentioned. I don't necessarily recommend this. It obviously costs money, and I was able to sell a bunch of things that I had sitting around for a little extra cash, consolidate lenses that I don't really use quite as much into a few lenses that I know will be more useful, and I could find good prices on most of the new gear that I bought. All in all, I didn't really have to spend any extra cash to make the switch, but keep in mind, you will need good batteries, you will need new flash triggers and things like that as well, so the prices can add up. Also do consider that lens choice because cameras will change a lot faster than lenses will. Especially with the EF adapter, Canon has a huge range of amazing lenses that are now getting cheaper and cheaper on the used market because of their new RF lenses. Plus, those RF lenses are incredible. I personally never really bought into them because I prefer the benefit that that adapter gave me, but they're solid lenses. Now, Sony's selection of lenses is definitely more limited, but with Tamron and Sigma making native lenses that work just as well as actual Sony lenses, better in some cases, it's actually pretty exciting to be in this new market. Now, I decided to go native instead of dealing with adapters, even though something like the Sigma EF to E mount adapter does work really well, because I'm not only taking photos and I want to make sure that I get smooth, reliable autofocus in video as well, and I just trust native lenses to do that better. Anyway, consider the lens choice and what you already have if you do try to switch systems. Now, I'd love to see on both of these systems, Sony and Canon, shutter angle settings instead of shutter speed settings as an option. It's just so much easier instead of remembering to set and change the shutter speed each time you change frame rates. I mean, either that or when you switch into different custom modes, for example, you could have one for slow motion with the shutter speed already dialed in, and one for normal shooting with that separate shutter speed already dialed in. I'm not sure how it will work on the A7S III yet with that new mode separation. Hopefully a little better than now, but still, shutter angle would be by far the easiest option. I'd also love if the shutter, the actual shutter on the A7S III closed when the camera was powered off, like on the EOS R system, but it's not a huge deal. And finally, Sony did fix or at least improve the menu system with the A7S III, so all the haters can stop complaining, myself included. I just hope that that comes to the other older bodies with a firmware update. That would be killer. So Sony, if you're listening, please give us updates for the new menu system on all of your bodies, or at least the more recent ones. As for colors, yes, I do consider this a final small note, not a main point in the video, because Sony works fine. I've had plenty of magenta issues on Canon, which I could easily complain about just as much, but I won't. The end. For now. Obviously, for different users, the set of priorities are going to be different if you're stronger on the photo side or on the video side, depending on what lenses you have and what you don't, and again, what features in these cameras are the most important to you personally. But again, for me, I think that moving over from Canon to Sony at this time is probably one of the best times to do it because you're getting a lot out of the Sony system, and to reach that level with Canon, you're probably going to have to wait a bit longer. But anyway, if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to tell me you hate me for changing camera systems, please let me know down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. Otherwise, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, thank you for watching.